So I want you to imagine, just for a second, standing in a dusty, totally packed yard in Kingston, Jamaica.
Oh, wow,
And
yeah.
it's the late 1950s. And towering over you, literally blocking out the streetlights, is this massive makeshift wall of wooden speaker boxes.
Right, like giant wardrobes.
Exactly. Giant wardrobes painted in these bright, crazy colors. And when the record drops, the bass coming out of those homemade bins is so incredibly heavy that it physically displaces the air around you.
Oh, it rattles your ribs.
It does. It actually makes your vision blur for like a fraction of a second.
Because it's really not a passive listening experience at all. I mean, in those spaces, you don't just hear the music, you physically feel it vibrating through the soles of your shoes. It shoots right up your spine.
Yeah.
It was engineered to be this full body communal impact, you know?
And from that vibrating hyperlocal street party, this really profound question emerges for us today.
Yeah.
How did this very DIY neighborhood street culture evolve into a massive global spiritual movement?
It's incredible to think about.
It really is. How did it birth entirely new genres of music and literally bring violently feuding politicians to hold hands on stage?
Yeah, that actually happened.
So today, we are going deep into the source material. This deep dive is going to trace the sonic, cultural, and spiritual evolution of reggae music.
Absolutely.
We're exploring how the technology demanded the music, the profound Rastafari beliefs that fueled its message, and the overlooked innovators, especially the women, who really built this foundation.
And to really grasp what our sources are telling us today, you have to completely scrap that cliche, commercialized image of reggae.
The whole chill beach vibe thing.
Right, exactly. You know, reggae as just relaxed, chill beach music, that is a very modern kind of sanitized veneer.
Yeah.
What we are actually looking at today is a highly sophisticated engine of resistance.
Mhm.
It's about intense technical innovation and really deep Black consciousness.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the music, the sources make it clear we actually first have to understand the hardware.
The sound systems.
Right. We have to talk about why those towering speaker boxes in 1940s and 50s Kingston even existed in the first place.
Well, at the time, you know, if you wanted to throw a party, live bands were incredibly expensive.
Sure.
And the average person in Kingston certainly didn't own a personal record player or even like a radio powerful enough to entertain a big crowd.
So local entrepreneurs just stepped in to fill that void.
Exactly. They started building massive mobile playback units. These were the original sound systems.
Wow.
They'd load up a truck with huge amplifiers, turntables, and those giant bass bins we talked about, and just set up in a neighborhood yard.
And at first they were mostly just playing imported American R&B records, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Imported rhythm and blues.
Mm-hmm.
And the dance itself became the absolute center of community life.
Like the place to be.
Oh, totally. It was your social club, your fashion runway, and your local news network just all rolled into one event.
And it was fiercely competitive, almost violently so sometimes, right?
Oh, heavily competitive.
I mean, this is where clash culture is born. Rival sound systems would set up a few streets apart and literally battle each other to draw the biggest crowd.
Yeah, and to win, they needed exclusive tracks that the other guy didn't have.
The dubplates.
Exactly, what they called dub plates.
So I'm trying to picture the guy actually running the turntables. The selector.
Right.
Is the Jamaican selector essentially the grandfather of the modern club DJ and like the Spotify algorithm combined?
Yeah.
Because they were curating the vibe for the crowd.
I see where you're going with that, but I'd actually argue they were the exact opposite of an algorithm.
Really? How so?
Well, a Spotify algorithm is passive, right? It just feeds you what you already like based on data.
That makes sense.
But a Jamaican selector in the 1950s was deeply empathetic, highly reactive, and aggressively human.
I get it.
They had to read the physical energy of the room in real time. If the crowd was losing energy, the selector had to know exactly which exclusive rhythm to drop to whip them back into a frenzy.
And this is the literal birthplace of bass culture, too.
Yes, because they were deliberately altering the equipment to boost the low end.
So it wasn't just turning up the volume dial.
No. The sound engineers building these systems realized early on that bass wasn't just a frequency on a spectrum.
What was it then?
It was the emotional gravity of the dance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They physically wired these systems to artificially emphasize the low end because they understood that heavy bass forces people to move together.
It dictates the physical rhythm of the crowd.
Exactly.
But eventually, relying purely on imported American R&B records just wasn't enough to win these clashes.
Right, the supply kind of dried up.
Yeah, the American sound started shifting toward early rock and roll, which didn't have that same driving groove that the Jamaican crowds wanted.
So Jamaican musicians had to start making their own music to feed these giant speakers.
And that necessity forces this incredible chemical reaction.
It really does. Local musicians took bento, which is a traditional Jamaican acoustic folk music.
Usually played with banjos and rumba boxes, right?
Exactly, and they slammed it into American jazz and R&B.
And the result, emerging in the late 1950s, was ska.
Ska! Yes.
And ska is frantic. It's incredibly fast, highly upbeat, and heavily driven by these blaring horn sections.
It's very high energy.
Yeah, and reading the history makes perfect sense why it sounded like that. It was the literal soundtrack to Jamaica gaining independence from Britain in 1962.
It's the sound of sheer, unadulterated optimism.
Right, you had legendary bands like the Scatolites inventing the blueprint.
Unbelievable musicians.
And then by 1964, Millie Small releases My Boy Lollipop, which just explodes internationally and introduces the ska rhythm to the globe.
But, that frantic optimism couldn't really last forever.
No. By 1966, the music mutates again.
The tempo drops dramatically.
It evolves into what became known as rocksteady.
Right, the blaring horns step into the background, the bass line becomes the absolute focal point, and vocal harmonies take center stage.
Okay, wait, I have to ask about this tempo drop. The music slows down significantly. There's this famous legend that the scorching summer heat wave of 1966 was so brutal that people physically couldn't dance to the frantic pace of ska anymore.
Right, the heat wave theory.
Yeah. So the musicians literally had to play slower. Is that actually true, or was this a deliberate artistic choice?
It's actually a fascinating mix of both.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the extreme heat of 66 absolutely played a practical role in exhausting the dancers and the musicians in those packed yards.
I can only imagine.
But if we look at how the music functions, slowing the tempo served a much more profound artistic purpose.
How so? What does a slower beat actually achieve musically?
Well, think about the physical space between the drum beats.
Okay.
When ska is racing at 130 beats per minute, vocalists are basically just shouting catchy, rhythmic hooks over the horns just to keep up.
Right, there's literally no room to breathe.
Exactly. But when rocksteady slows that tempo down, it creates massive pockets of empty musical space.
Oh, I see.
Suddenly, a vocalist doesn't have to shout. They can hold notes. They can explore complex melodies.
And most importantly, they can tell complete, nuanced stories.
Exactly. Slowing the music down literally created the sonic canvas required for deep storytelling.
And that naturally leads to reggae by 1968.
Right, marked by Toots and the Maytals releasing the track Do the Reggae.
Reggae slows things down even further and introduces the signature one-drop drum beat.
Which is crucial.
Mechanically, the one drop leaves the very first beat of a measure completely empty, emphasizing the third beat instead.
Yeah, combined with the scratchy skank guitar playing on the offbeats, it creates a deeply hypnotic, almost meditative groove.
And that slower, meditative groove arrived at the exact moment Jamaica was experiencing a massive social and spiritual awakening.
Perfect timing.
The music transitioned from upbeat party tunes to a global voice of protest. Now, before we dive into this next part, I want to take a quick pause for the listener.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because we are about to look at the spiritual movement of Rastafari today. And our goal here isn't to take a side on the theology or the politics.
We're just looking at the history.
Exactly. We're looking closely at our source material, purely from an educational standpoint, to understand exactly what practitioners believe. Because you simply cannot separate those religious and political beliefs from the mechanics of the music.
That's a vital distinction. You really can't understand reggae without understanding Rastafari.
Right.
The movement originated in the 1930s among impoverished, socially disenfranchised Afro-Jamaicans.
And they were heavily influenced by the black nationalist teachings of Marcus Garvey, right?
Yes. Garvey had famously urged his followers to look to Africa for the crowning of a black king as a sign of deliverance.
So at its core, Rastafari is a monotheistic belief in Yah, or God.
Right.
But unlike some Western religions where God is entirely external, Rastafari teaches that Jah partially resides within every single individual.
It's deeply internal. But the defining feature, the thing that defines the entire theology, is the belief surrounding the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie I.
He was born Ras Tafari Makonnen and crowned emperor in 1930?
Yes, and depending on the specific group within Rastafari, he is viewed as either the second coming of Jesus, Jah incarnate, or a supreme divine prophet.
And this theology creates a very stark map of the world.
It does.
On one side is Zion, representing Africa, and specifically Ethiopia, as the promised land of spiritual and physical freedom.
And on the opposite side is Babylon.
Right. And Babylon isn't just an ancient city.
No, it's the living representation of Western society, colonialism, police brutality, and oppressive capitalism.
For Rasta, the ultimate goal is to escape the physical and mental exile of Babylon and return to Zion.
And to survive inside Babylon without being corrupted by it, practitioners adopt a strict lifestyle called livity.
This isn't just a set of rules, it's a daily practice.
Exactly. It includes the idol diet, which is natural, largely vegan, and strictly avoids processed foods.
Because they view processed foods as the toxic products of colonial capitalism.
Right. And livity also includes wearing hair and dreadlocks.
Which our sources suggest was inspired by several things. The biblical vow of Samson, Hindu holy men, or even the Mau Mau rebels fighting British colonialism in Kenya.
It also involves the smoking of ganja, or cannabis.
But not as a recreational drug.
No, not at all. It's used as a biblical sacrament to aid meditation and spiritual communion.
And this was a practice likely synthesized from the Afro-Jamaican Kumina religion and Hindu indentured servants brought to the island.
That's what the historical record points to, yeah.
But here is where I genuinely struggle to wrap my head around the history.
What part?
How exactly did a group of disenfranchised Jamaicans center their entire religious theology around a living Ethiopian emperor?
Right.
Especially considering that Emperor Haile Selassie himself claimed to simply be a mortal Christian.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it sounds paradoxical. Until you look at the deep psychological wounds of the era, you have to look at the roots of Ethiopianism and the Pan-African movement. Jamaica had endured the severe generational trauma of the Atlantic slave trade.
Followed by centuries of brutal British colonialism.
Exactly. There was a desperate psychological need to reclaim a royal divine black identity that had been systematically erased.
So when Haile Selassie is crowned in 1930,
when he's crowned, complete with titles like King of Kings and Conquering Lion of the Tribe of Judah, he was the only independent black monarch in an Africa entirely carved up by European colonizers.
Yeah.
For marginalized Jamaicans reading the Bible, particularly the Book of Revelation, his coronation wasn't just politics.
It was the literal, undeniable fulfillment of scriptural prophecy.
Exactly. And when Selassie politely denied being a deity,
let me guess, they didn't believe him.
Many Rastas simply interpreted that extreme humility as further proof of his divine nature.
It's a profound reclaiming of power.
It really is.
And this potent mix of heavy hypnotic bass rhythms and deeply rooted Rastafari spirituality found his ultimate global messenger in the 1970s.
Bob Marley.
Bob Marley. What's fascinating about Marley is that his early life doesn't scream global icon.
Not at all.
He was a mixed race. His father was a white British colonial official who was largely absent.
And Marley was teased mercilessly in his neighborhood for his parentage.
Right. He actually worked as an apprentice welder before fully committing to music and forming the Wailing Wailers with Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer.
And his background gave him a unique perspective on being an outsider, which translated perfectly into his music.
So between 1972 and 1981, we enter the absolute golden age of roots reggae.
It's an incredible era. Marley and the Wailers released landmark albums like Catch a Fire, Exodus, and Survival.
The themes were uncompromising. African unity, armed and spiritual resistance to Babylon, and profound redemption.
And the socio-political impact he wielded in Jamaica was staggering.
Yeah, in 1976, there was a politically motivated assassination attempt on Marley.
Just days before a free concert designed to ease tensions in Kingston.
Right. He was shot in the chest and arm, but he still stepped on stage and performed.
Unbelievable courage.
And then 2 years later, he makes his legendary return for the 1978 One Love Peace concert.
This is a huge moment.
Kingston is practically a war zone at this point. It's politically fractured and incredibly violent.
Yeah.
Marley is on stage, and he remarkably gets the two violently feuding political leaders, Michael Manley and Edward Sega, to walk up, shake hands, and hold their hands up together over his head.
It is one of the most unbelievable moments of musical power in modern history.
It really proved that reggae had evolved far beyond just entertainment. It was a localized diplomatic force.
But while Marley was the charismatic, lyrical face of the movement, we have to look at the studio innovators behind the scenes, too.
The producers.
Right, because while Marley was writing the message, producers like Lee Scratch Perry and King Tubby were radically mutating the actual physics of the sound.
Okay, let's look closely at King Tubby, because he essentially invents dub music.
He does.
People always say he stripped tracks down to their absolute skeleton. But what does that actually mean mechanically? How do you strip a song down in a 1970s analog studio?
It means treating the mixing console itself as a musical instrument.
Okay.
Before King Tubby, the mixing board was just a tool to balance the volume of the singers and the guitars so everything sounded nice and neat.
Just a technical utility.
Right. Tubby realized the board could be played live. He would take a finished reggae track on analog tape and completely mute the vocal tracks.
Wow.
Then he would use a high-pass filter to aggressively strip away the mid-range frequencies, isolating nothing but the thunderous drum and the heavy bass.
So he's carving out all that musical space again.
Yes, but then he fills that empty space with chaos.
Chaos. Like what?
He would take tiny fragments of the guitar or a single horn blast, run it through massive custom-built delay units, and physically ride the faders up and down.
Creating those infinite echoing feedback loops.
Exactly, loops that just washed over the heavy bass line.
So he's not just remixing the song. He's manipulating the actual physical space and texture of the audio.
Precisely. Dub music fundamentally transformed the concept of what a record could be.
It proved that the producer was an artist and the studio was an instrument.
And by doing this, these Jamaican engineers laid the literal technical groundwork for almost all modern electronic music.
Like techno, dubstep, drum and bass.
All of it traces back to dub.
That is incredible. Now, while Marley and the male producers understandably became the global face of reggae, our sources make it abundantly clear that the true heartbeat of the movement was sustained and shaped by pioneering women.
Definitely.
And reading through this history, these women had to fight a massive uphill battle for recognition in an industry that was overwhelmingly male-dominated.
With that question, I mean, you have foundational figures like Sonia Pottinger.
Jamaica's first major female record producer.
Right. She ran the Treasure Isle label. And she wasn't just an administrator, she was a sonic visionary who provided a crucial platform for countless artists during the chaotic transitions between ska, rocksteady, and early reggae.
And then you have the I3s, Rita Marley, Marcia Griffiths, and Judy Mowat.
Legends.
Globally, they're mostly recognized as Bob Marley's backup singers, the women swaying behind him on stage. But they were absolute powerhouses in their own right.
Oh, absolutely.
Judy Mowat's 1980 album, Black Woman, is cited in our sources as a massive landmark. It was one of the first reggae albums entirely written, arranged, and produced by a woman.
It's a phenomenal record.
But I'm curious about the environment they were working in. Given the traditional, sometimes deeply patriarchal gender roles within Rastafari,
Right.
where women were often expected to cover their heads, wear long skirts, and submit to male leadership. How did these women manage to break through and assert their own voices?
It was incredibly difficult, and it required immense navigation. Traditional Rastafari doctrine, relying heavily on specific biblical scriptures, often positioned women in a subordinate supporting role.
Yeah.
But what's brilliant about artists like Rita Marley and Judy Mowat is that they didn't reject the theology.
They didn't.
No, they used its core tenets of resilience and spiritual truth to carve out their own space. They sang about the uniquely female perspective on suffering and spiritual strength.
So they were pushing the boundaries from the inside out.
Exactly. They weren't just singing background. They were the cultural architects providing the emotional backbone of the music.
And their perseverance eventually cracked the foundation of that patriarchy.
Which directly paved the way for the women who took over when reggae morphed into dancehall in the 80s and 90s.
Like Sister Nancy.
Yes. Sister Nancy, whose track Bam Bam remains one of the most sampled reggae tracks in all of global music history.
And later, Lady Saw, who unapologetically claimed the title Queen of Dancehall and became the first female dancehall artist to win a Grammy.
Which brings us to the modern era, with artists like Spice or Coffee, who shattered records by becoming the youngest and first female solo artist to win the Grammy for Best Reggae Album.
The doors those early pioneers kicked open are still widening.
They really are. And driven by these dynamic artists, the music inevitably burst out of Jamaica.
It mutated as it hit different shores and collided with new technologies.
Reggae heavily influenced the UK punk scene, for example. It gave birth to the two-tone fashion and ska punk movement.
It resonated with indigenous communities in the U.S. and the Maori in New Zealand, who saw their own struggles mirrored in the lyrics.
It even sparked massive African reggae stars like Alpha Blondy and South Africa's Lucky Dube,
Who explicitly used the heavy bass and Rastafari messaging to fight apartheid.
It proved to be the most adaptable music on earth.
And back home in Jamaica, as the roots era of the 70s gave way to the 1980s, the music underwent another massive mechanical shift.
The live bands of the Roots era gave way to the digital revolution of dancehall.
The absolute pivotal moment was the 1985 release of a track called Under Me Sling Tang by Wayne Smith.
Yes.
Our sources highlight this track as a total paradigm shift. Why was it so revolutionary?
Because it was built on a cheap, consumer-grade Casio MT40 keyboard.
Just a basic keyboard.
Yeah, the producer found a pre-programmed rock beat on the Casio, slowed it down, and manipulated it to create a massive computerized bassline.
Wow.
It was an entirely electronic digital rhythm. It was cheaper to make, it was faster, and it changed dancehall forever.
And that single digital beat essentially paved the way for the entire creation of reggaeton in Latin America.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? Think about the trajectory of that. Sound system culture starts in the 1950s by playing analog American R&B records on giant wooden speakers.
Great.
The locals innovate to make their own music. It evolves, it mutates, it goes digital. And a few decades later, Jamaica is creating the heavy digital bass beats that America and the rest of the world would eventually adopt for modern hip-hop, pop, and reggaeton.
It is a complete full-circle cultural exchange.
It's an incredible narrative.
Reggae's ultimate legacy is that universal adaptability. It provided marginalized people across the globe with a discursive stance.
A ready-made language to articulate their struggles?
Exactly. The dreadlocks, the red, gold, and green colors, the concept of fighting Babylon, it all became a universal symbol of resistance.
It effectively became the world's protest music, adaptable to any struggle, anywhere.
It really did.
A small Caribbean island took the historical pain of exile, combined it with the physical physics of massive vibrating bass bins, and generated an unstoppable cultural and spiritual force.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into these sources today, I want to leave you with one final thing to think about.
Okay, let's hear it.
Consider the Jamaican concept of versioning that we talked about with those early sound systems and King Tubby's dub plates.
Right.
The producers would take one single instrumental track, one rhythm, and they wouldn't hoard it.
They'd share it.
They would let endless different artists record their own unique vocal versions over that exact same beat.
Yeah.
How did this simple, localized necessity for winning neighborhood sound system clashes fundamentally rewire the psychology of modern art?
That's a huge question.
Is Jamaican versioning actually the true philosophical ancestor of today's open source culture, where everything from software to TikTok trends is built to be remixed, shared, and endlessly iterated upon by the community?
That is a brilliant thought to leave on. The next time you hear a remix or feel the bass drop heavily in your chest at a club, remember that wall of vibrating wooden speaker boxes in 1950s Kingston.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep exploring, keep listening, and we'll catch you next time.